Hey, this is Patrick Rady, and I'll be your host for your Basketball and Bourbon podcast. For the next hour, we'll share stories involving two of my greatest passions, basketball and bourbon. Sit back and enjoy stories shared from people who have good old-fashioned experiences from the hardwood and the barrel. As we like to say on the show here, cheers to the round ball and the barrel. Hey, this is Patrick Rady. Thank you for joining us for episode 1 of the Basketball and Bourbon podcast. Today, our guest is IHSAA official Tim Cartright. Last year, Tim pulled the trifecta. He was an official for the IHSAA state finals in football, girls basketball, and boys basketball. So, without further ado, here is Tim. Tim, what got you into officiating?
Initially, it was just really to help kids, and I was coaching my sons and helping them, and started working in the CYO leagues and doing some of those games, and really just to earn Christmas money. It wasn't to go where I have gone in the 28 years that I've been officiating, but it became a passion and a hobby, and I really enjoyed it. So I tried to do it at the best level I could.
So you mentioned that you tried to officiate at the best level you could. What would you say would be some of your biggest accomplishments as an official?
Well, always you think state finals is the pinnacle, but I've also been fortunate enough to referee three levels of college basketball, from NAIA Division III NCAA and Division II NCAA, and many of the tournaments. Not quite to the regional or Final Four levels or any of those, but just to enjoy the game and see higher levels.
So let's talk about something else that both of us enjoy, and that would be bourbon. Tim, what would you say is your everyday bourbon that you go to that you can readily get and it's not allocated? So what would you say is some of your everyday bourbons that you like to drink?
Recently, it's been Michter Single Barrel and Maker's 46, just because they're reasonably priced and they have really good flavor. One's a rye, one's a wheat, so it just depends on the flavor profile I'm in the mood for.
I'm with you right there on both of those. Michter's is one of my favorite go-tos. Actually, it's the first bourbon that I ever tried. So Michter's holds a special place in my heart. So I've got to ask, you get to the pinnacle, you get to the best this year, you end it with a state championship game that you're officiating. Do you celebrate with a special pour?
I actually did. I went with another state finals official and one of the state assistant commissioners, and we enjoyed a nice cigar. And I had Sam Houston 15 year, which is a really good 15-year bourbon that I had bought. I didn't break into my big allocated stuff. I probably would have. It would have been my first state finals, but
I'm with you, Tim. It's hard to open up an allocated bottle, especially when maybe you haven't had that one or it takes 2 to 3 years to even get one. So we'll transition back to a basketball topic here. Let's talk about halftime and just take us through what a halftime would look like in the officials' locker room. As coaches, we'll get with our assistant coaches, maybe see if there's anything adjustments that we want to make, and then we'll go in and we'll talk it over with the team. But tell us what's going in the mind of the officials, because I know you guys have discussions just like we do.
we generally start talking about kind of the situations that happened, if there was anything odd, kind of the foul scenario. If we feel like there's somebody that's, we know kind of the foul situation, we obviously don't want to affect the game by fouling somebody out on something cheap, but we do want to know where players are, who we've had problems with, if we've talked to a player during the game, trying to get them to help them out by, you know, talking to them about a non-impact situation, like somebody blocked out but the ball went the other direction, or somebody displaced somebody slightly, and it could create a foul situation. So we talk about those situations anywhere that we as officials have had intersecting situations for calls.
So you talk about having, conversations in there. Do you work with the same referees? Do you have a regular crew that you officiate these games with?
Generally in basketball, especially for boys, Jason Ferguson and I have been together almost our entire career, probably close to 25 years. And we've mixed in a lot with some other state finals officials that have worked with us. Dan Morgan has been majority of our third, Mike Eason. And then we've even tried to pick up some new guys. Sean Harmon and Kevin Milam are a couple to come to mind of guys that we're trying to help along the way.
Helping out referees. What can we do as a society? I think there's no secret out there that there is a shortage of referees. And we can look, we can point the finger. Fans, I know I myself as a coach have done some things, said some things that I would like to take back. But what can we do to ensure that the kids are going to get to play these games? Because right now we're seeing nobody wants to referee, and I can understand how that is. But what do you think, Tim?
One of the areas I think that's going to be huge is coaches such as yourself encouraging the young men and women that you coach to think about officiating because and giving back to the game they love so much. One of the questions you asked me about is new what to help a younger official. First of all, take it slow. Don't work above a level that you have confidence in working. And then secondly, get a mentor because I, for the last 3 years, have been involved with Don Nestor in teaching a new officials class for the IOA in Indianapolis, and it starts in September this year on the 8th and goes 5 different nights. And we've already got 10 people signed up for the class and maybe more. But the key to getting newer officials is going to be one, uh, us working with mentors. Two, I'm not calling out administrators, but we as the senior group or administrators or coaches or ads or whatever need to address this dilemma we have with fans, and we understand that kids are more and more specialized, and there's a lot of money for their kids to play, but they're not going to play if there's no officials. There's been games canceled. There's been games moved to Thursday nights and for football. There's possibly games going to be different times so you have enough people to work it. It's going to be tough if we continue to lose officials within their second or third year of officiating.
I agree with everything that you said there. I recently went back and renewed my volleyball license. And one of the things that I've decided this go around was I'm going to do more middle school games and freshman level games. The speed of the game's not as quick. I can get my mechanics down and really have more confidence in myself. So I totally agree about not taking a game or a level above where you're at now as an official. And to go back to, what do you think? What can we do to help educate these fans? I think one of the things that we could do probably as coaches is when we had that parent meeting, stress to them, if you still want to see your kids playing high school sports, we have got to be under control, and things may not go our way. But we talk to our kids about having a next play mentality. I think the fans got to have that next play mentality.
Pat, I there was a couple of things that I looked up this week preparing for tonight, and I'll throw these out there for people to find on the internet for themselves, but they're really good articles. One is an article from a magazine called Her View from Home, and it was titled "Before You Yell at the Ref Tonight, Let Me Tell You About My Daddy." And the second thing that I'd suggest people look up is an article by a Division One NCAA Final Four men's official named John Higgins, and he had a situation where he was going to watch his 15-year-old son officiate an AAU freshman game, program, and one of his buddies was another 15-year-old was supposed to show up. Well, that other kid didn't make it, and so John, who could make $2,500 to do an SEC final game or whatever, stepped in to work that game for free to be with his son. And he said, and if you read the article, he talked about some of the things he heard the coaches say to his own team he had never heard in an NCAA Division One game. There were intentional fouls, too aggressive plays, techs, ejections, and he was told he didn't know how to officiate. How are you going to expect some young officials to deal with that if we don't address the fans and what they do? I mean, it would be amazing if somebody would have walked up to those people and said, "Do you realize who that person is on the court who has been scrutinized by the best in the game and he's working a game for you for free and you act like this?"
That just blows my mind. NCAA Final Four official. But nevertheless, we've got people out there that don't don't seem to care, and it is a concern. I know as a parent myself, I go watch my daughter play, and as a coach, I'm just concerned that we're going to run off a lot of good officials. And I want to go back to being having a daughter and everything. You mentioned two articles, so you talked about the Final Four, the guy and his son reffing together. But go back to the one about the girl that was with her dad was officiating, and kind of like her viewpoint from him officiating.
Yeah, it's that article I just told you, her view from home. If you type in to a Google search, "Before you yell at the referee tonight, let me tell you about my daddy." And it was a, a lady writing an article from a child's viewpoint of her daddy and what he does when he leaves to go to work, and then he takes his bag with him and he leaves at 8 o'clock in the morning to work his 9 to 5, and then he goes out and referees other people's kids. And a lot of times we're, meaning her, are in the gym watching her daddy referee. And one time the little girl asked her mom, a little excerpt from the article, "Mom, who are we rooting for tonight?" And mom said, "The referees." So it's a really good read, quick, and it would be something that get a different viewpoint from a child's standpoint.
And you said it there, child standpoint. I totally agree with that. People don't realize there's a human element in this thing, that the referees are fathers, mothers, wives, husbands out there. And we have to try to take that in consideration, that there could be, even whether you like, there could be family members around. They have feelings too. I also think people don't realize the time that you put in, the time that you sacrifice so that you can be at the best of your levels. To me, it's like coaching. So much you are with other people's kids, more sometimes during the season than you are your own kids or your own family. So as fans, as coaches, we need to just put that human element in there and realize that there are a lot of people out here sacrificing so that these young people can have a game. And we're talking Indiana and Indiana basketball and how much that means and how special it is here.
Well, and some of my best friends are officials, and we enjoy that. But the game isn't just when we walk on the court with stripes on and then we leave and go have a good time afterwards. There are multiple clinics and camps and evenings of like this and other activities that we're doing to learn and critique the game more so than just the court. And that can come from a 30-year veteran like me to a 2-year brand new person is spending the same and sometimes more time away from their family learning this game and enjoying it. So uh, when you talk about humanizing the game, That is when you're yelling at somebody, that is somebody's dad, brother, uncle, son, grandfather, in my case, um, sister, daughter, mother, wife. And would you act that way to your friend's wife just because they have a decision to make? Um, to throw this in for you, Pat, I was asked by the executive board committee at the state finals what I thought about sportsmanship and fans and things. And I have literally asked a fan after a game when they not cornered me, but just casually asked me a question about something. And I said, would you let me operate on you as a physician since I've watched all these doctor or hospital shows on TV and I think I can do a good job at it? And he laughed because he got the analogy that if you've never put a whistle around your neck and then put it in your mouth and had to officiate a game at the speed of some of these kids playing and make a split second decision, and hopefully it's right, and probably 95% of our calls in what I call our primary area are accurate. We don't watch the ball. We watch situations that happen in our area, and that's where the game is different for officiating than it is for a fan. My wife didn't have a child that um, played sports. And when she met me, she said, I wish my dad would have been able to sit with you and watch a game from a referee's viewpoint because it's watched totally different than an average fan.
I tell you what, that's interesting. It'd be cool if we got a coach together, a referee together, and then you maybe had some fans and you just watch a basketball game. And then each person gets to give their viewpoint. What are we looking at in this? What are we, maybe that would help educate some of the fans, the parents, to understanding this is what we're looking at, as a referee, as a coach, everything. Because sometimes I think love is blind and we see through blinders when it's our kids, our own kids, or it's our own team. So there are big games. There's no question about that. And there's rivalry games. Have you ever gotten do you get more juiced up? Do you get juiced up when it's time for a big game? Do you ever get wrapped up in the moment when you see like a performance where maybe a kid's getting 45 or 50 and crowd's going crazy and doing unbelievable moves or whatever? What goes on in a referee's mind? Do you get a part of that?
It may be a shocker to many people, but we don't care who wins the game. Most of the time, we don't have any dog in the fight, as they say. And I've officiated players that are now in the NBA. And do I officiate those games differently? No, not really. Matter of fact, sometimes we might be a little tougher on a really, really good player if they're being lazy because you expect more out of them. But we don't really get wrapped up in that moment of that player's on the court. Oh my gosh. However, I can understand it because, as you said, Pat, I've coached, I've played, and now I've officiated. So I can see it from all three perspectives. And I've been a fan. And you got to, as one coach asked me one time, you got to walk a mile in my shoes. If you've not put the shoes on of an official or coach, as you are, then you really don't have a reason to be able to critique somebody in their job.
All right, we're going to take a short break and we're going to hear from our sponsor of the podcast, Peerless Distillery. And then when we come back, Tim is going to tell us if he had to put a starting five out there of bourbons, what would his starting five be? See you after the break.
The Peerless household offers an ambiance like no other. Our team is honored to share what makes the Kentucky Peerless Distilling Company so unique. Our urban distillery and vast family history are unmatched, After 5 generations of bourbon makers, we have the patience to make your favorite bourbon.
We are Kentucky Peerless Distilling Company, makers of fine bourbon and rye whiskey.
Welcome back. All right, we're ready for my favorite segment. Tim, tell us who would be your bourbon starting 5.
So my starting 5 would be ones that I've had, not necessarily ones I wish I had.
I like that. I think that's going to be what we're going to do from here on out. Your starting 5 will be bourbons that you've had or that you have in your possession. I mean, heck, we would all like to start Michael Jordan or Larry Bird or Magic Johnson, Kobe Bryant. So I like that. So Tim, go ahead.
My first one would be Pappy Van Winkle 15 year. I've had multiple years of that one. That one is my favorite. Another one would be from the same distillery, Rock Hill Farms. And actually, I'm picking a lot on Buffalo Trace, but I've spent quite a bit of time in that vicinity. So that would be another one. The third one from that distillery is Thomas Handy Rye. I had it last year for Christmas with my sons, and it is really, really good. The fourth one, which is not an easy one to get, they don't do it all the time, is Woodford Double Double Oak, which comes only in a 3.75 bottle, but it is one of my faves. And the last one is Michter's Toasted Barrel bourbon, which I searched and searched and searched and searched and searched and finally got one last January. So that would be my 5 starting 5. You know, you got other ones. There's so many out there that it's hard to tell you who's my favorite, but I would pick those 5.
That's an impressive list right there. So if I had to pick mine today, I'd go with Blanton's. Got to go with the home team, the sponsor, Peerless. Love Michter's. Weller Antique gets in the lineup. Weller Antique 107, that is. And then I'm going with Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. So those are all that I've had in my collection and have tried, and that would be my starting 5 right there.
I'll tell you, with the Peerless, they came out with a small bottle of their double oak, and I ended up getting at 2 different times their double oak in a big 750 milliliter, and those are really, really good. The other one, and I'm going to throw a plug in for the sponsor again. I just got an email that on the, what is it, the 20th, I think, that Peerless is coming out with a rum cast bourbon, and I'm hoping to get one of those.
I have not had a bourbon that I didn't like from Peerless Distillery. Now, there's some that I like more than others. I like the bourbon, definitely. I like the double oak. But even their rye, and I'm not really a rye person, even their rye, to me, was very good. If you get a chance and you've not been to the Peerless Distillery in Louisville, Kentucky, I highly recommend it. Great tour. Go to their website, Peerless Distillery, and book a reservation. If you get there, a lot of times the owner, Corky Taylor's there. Tell Corky Patrick from the Basketball and Bourbon podcast sent you. All right, we're going to go transition back into some basketball. And in Indiana, we like to say in 49 states it's basketball, but this is Indiana. Indiana is known for the gymnasium sizes, some of the biggest high school gymnasiums in the world. So Tim, tell us, what are some of the best atmospheres that you've ever officiated in the state of Indiana?
Well, probably the most loudest and craziest game that I officiated was in Bedford in the semi-state It actually happened to be a girls' game, and you could hardly hear your whistle. People were wrapped around the building, out in the parking lot, zigzagging, kind of like you're at an amusement park, waiting to get into the facility for the two games that were played in that semi-state in 2013. Um, Talking about a special player, Damon Bailey's daughter was playing. He was coaching um, as assistant in that game, and it was very very loud and a very awesome game. Another facility, obviously, is the state finals. Um, Enjoyed that one with Ben Davis and Fort Wayne North. Again, you're at the pinnacle of the season. The game means everything to the kids. You're talking about some high profile players playing. Some of them are still in college, Kentucky, and different locations. And always another one is Newcastle, um, in that big gym, playing or officiating, whether it's a regular season game or the Hall of Fame. A couple of years ago, had the Hall of Fame final with Center Grove and Warren Central, with David Bell and Trace Jackson Davis playing. So there's some places like that you could go around the state and start naming some of the wonderful locations. Seymour, um, even officiating in Terre Haute at Indiana State's gym before, and uh, stuff up in Fort Wayne and the, the the Coliseum up there. Did a state finals there. So, and then even atmosphere wise, when Romeo was playing at New Albany and they were playing Carmel, and you couldn't get in the place; it was sold out. And watching a great player like him playing the game in his home gym.
Interesting you say that about Romeo Langford in his home gym there in New Albany and the atmosphere. My dad coached for 51 years and has seen a lot of games. Remember him? I think he went when Romeo was a sophomore or junior, and he came back and he told me, he said that was the most electric atmosphere that he had been a part of in a high school gym since he had watched Damon Bailey play at Bedford North Lawrence High School. So, one of the things, Tim, that really I admire about you, every time I watch you ref, whether you're refereeing Romeo Langford, whether you're at New Albany, whether you Newcastle High School or Little Cloverdale High School in Cloverdale, Indiana, you give those kids the same effort at a small school 1A Cloverdale as you do a 4A New Albany.
And Pat, to kind of go back to one of the questions you asked me about what happens at halftime, our pregame in many of our games is tonight's game is the most important game in the state to the kids that are on the court that we're working. Whether it is a 1A or 4A game, doesn't matter. We want to do the job we have in front of us the best we can, regardless of who's out there. Obviously, personalities can make a difference in what happens on the court, but we don't try and give you any different effort, because that game is the most important game to the kids that are playing that day.
We've had some serious discussion about officials and what it's going to take to get officials back out there, but let's throw a little humor in here. Tim, what is one of the funniest things that's ever happened to you with an interaction with a coach or maybe a fan?
Well, obviously there's a joke about coach pulling his cell phone out of his pocket and showing it to you and saying, "Ref, this your phone? You missed a call." Um, so there's a joke there, but I'll bring up a situation of where I dispelled a coach being angry. and gave him something to think about. And he still talks about it today. I saw him about 3 weeks ago at a golf outing, and he's talking about that same situation. And it was where Dan, Jason, and I were refereeing a game, and the coach was standing behind me, and he said it loud enough so I would understand he's really talking to me, but he said he was talking to his kids. And he said to the kids, "Hey, we're playing 8 people tonight, so work hard." And I said, "Coach, I'll be right back." And he spun around, and I went back down the other end of the court. And I came back down in front of him, and I said, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you my whistle, and I'm going to take your clipboard. And with you refereeing, I'm going to win this ball game for you." And he closed his mouth. He looked at me, and he goes, "That's probably the best reaction or response I've ever had." And he still talks about today and laughs his tail off.
That's classic. I can if that was me, I'd be still laughing about that. So that's just you know that's the great thing about sports when you get people that have been in it for a while, just hearing the stories that we're not necessarily privy to as spectators. So I want to ask you, I always hear from referees, there's no such thing as over the back. And if I go to a game, I'm going to hear the fans yelling, "Over the back! You got to call that! You got to call that over the back!" So tell us, is there such thing as over the back?
Well, the one you mentioned, over the back, I just because you might be taller than me and you jump up and grab the ball over the top of my head, if there's no contact, there is no foul. There has to be the definition of a foul is illegal contact on an opponent. So if I jump up and grab the ball without touching you, it is nothing. And if there is a foul where somebody calls it, it's a push. It's not an over the back call. But one of the big ones, it doesn't happen all the time, but it is over and back because people think when the ball or 1 foot is in the front court, and then they step back and go get it in the back court because their right foot was in the back court, or the ball was still in the back court, and they came from the front court to the back court, it's over and back. They don't understand that there has to be 3 things happen for it to be in the front court. Both feet and the ball have to be in the front court for it to have front court status. And if not all 3 is there and they go back into the back court, it is not over and back.
Okay, let's transition to a topic that I think has spread nationwide when it comes to basketball, high school basketball, and that is the addition of the shot clock. So you've reffed college basketball. What are your feelings, Tim? Should high school adopt the shot clock? Would it help the play?
Shot clocks are fine. Here's going to be the dilemma is having people to know how to run it and the nuances that it'll change in the rule book once you have it. Because the collegiate rule book has changed multiple times, and a lot of times every year there's something added because of the shot clock situations that can happen. Did it hit the rim? Do we reset? Did it run out um, before the player, let go of the ball? In a regular game like what we have, we only look at that situation 4 times a game. At the end of the first, the second, the third, and the fourth quarter, we know if the ball's let go in time. In a collegiate game, that can happen multiple times in 1.5. And collegiate level has video replay to get it right, where I don't know that we'll ever see it in high school because of the cost and the amount of people to run it. Do I think it's a problem? No. when I played, when you played, we didn't have shot clock. We didn't even have 3-point line. So you just had to play. And I think when I was in high school, our high school basketball team averaged 75 points a game without a 3-point arc because they just went down and played and shot and did the things that shot clock's not going to make it better for us. I just don't think we'll see it in high school.
Bring up some good points there, Tim. And I'm a proponent of the shot clock. I think you'll see better defense out there. I think it would be easier to get the kids to convince that they can, to play defense for 35, 45 seconds. But at the same time, I don't know if a shot clock, I don't think it, as I said, I think it's going to help the defenses. I think you're going to see some bad shots taken and everything. So I don't think a shot clock would necessarily increase the scoring. So I agree with you on that point. One that I've said I would like to see, but I want to get your opinion. What about the charge circle? Yeah, I see so many times guys are underneath the basket and it's bang, bang play, but as we said, ref college. So what do you think? Should the high school adopt the charge circle?
Again, I don't have a problem with it because I've officiated it for however long it's been in college basketball. It is something that requires not just the person calling the foul to be aware of it, because you got to watch bodies and did they get there in time? And it's tough to watch bodies and feet to make sure that were they in or out of the arc to call the foul. And again, we don't have replay. So when we start adding circles and clocks to a game, it adds a lot of nuances that may make it tougher, even for new officials, since you talked about new officials earlier, to get it right. And is it going to create more consternation with the fans because they were in the arc instead of just officiating the play? Yeah, you could take a great charge, get motored over, and your heel's on the arc and it's a block. And you got smoked and you're being called for a foul for a block because you were in the arc.
See, that's why I like having dialogue like this. You've got me thinking. I thought we got to have it. But I see the points that you make. And so, I think this is very important when we're doing these rules, that coaches and officials need to be sitting down together, talking about these things, throwing, before we make and jump into decisions and rules that could affect a lot of people. So what would you say are some things that could be implemented into the game that would help improve the play?
A couple of things that might improve the game quickly would be one of the things that women's college has done is they went to quarters and reset the fouls at the end of the quarter. So you're not sitting there shooting bonus 3 minutes into the half or 4 minutes, 5 minutes into the half, and then the whole next 8-minute quarter for high school, you're shooting a bonus on every foul. You want to be stupid in the first quarter? Go ahead. We're shooting 2 shots at 5 fouls. We don't shoot 1 and 1. You get to 5, we shoot 2. You get to the end of the first quarter, the team fouls go to 0. Now you got to foul 5 more times before we shoot the bonus again. That has speeded up the game in that situation. Yep. And the other thing that improved the game was the fact of body contact. You get one hot stove touch, you put another one on, it's foul. What that's teaching players is stop all the contact and let freedom of movement happen so we can have higher scores. And the collegiate level has seen the game scores go up because of that, if those fouls are called, because then it's not who's the strongest, it's who can score without contact all the time. So if we want to improve the scoring and the vision or the viewership, take away some of the things that are creating lower scores and a lot more physicality.
I'll tell you, my father was saying that in the 90s when it was starting to really get physical and the weight room was beginning to be more of a factor in the game. he was saying that it's a game of finesse, and we got to get back to that. And that will, that's what's causing the scores to be, low, because you're just allowing the hands and the check and the hold and the push and those kind of things. And I agree with you. I think if we get back to it being a finesse game and more skill, then we're going to see higher games, and it's going to be a lot more enjoyable to watch when you see the freedom of movement, because that's what basketball was meant to be, the freedom of movement. Okay, I want to go back. You mentioned a term there, hot touch. Can you tell our listeners what you're talking about from a referee standpoint? What is a hot touch?
Okay, so if you walked up to a stove and you wanted to see if it was hot, you'd put your hand on it and touch it, but you wouldn't leave it on there. In most of the game at the higher levels, you get one of those. The second time you put a hand on that ball handler, kind of like you're touching the stove again, but this time you're leaving a hand on there, it's a foul. And they stop touching them. They start playing basketball with their feet and not their hands, and that allows freedom of movement by the offense to allow them to score. So then you don't have as much physical touching of an offensive player that allows them to have freedom to move.
Absolutely. I hope we have some people from the NFHS that may be listening to this. Hey, these are things that we need to take in consideration to help grow this game, to help get fans back out to the game. We have to constantly be thinking about how are we going to get more fans out there. And I think one of that is to raise the level of play. And I think people want to see scoring. So one of the things I like about bourbon is the history of the bourbon. And there's a history behind each distillery. So Tim, what would be some of the best distillery tours that our listeners could take?
All of them have, like you mentioned, Peerless has some really good information, being one of the older ones after Prohibition. But I have spent probably more time at Buffalo Trace. Woodford's an upscale type facility in terms of their entrance and where you meet and all that stuff. But Buffalo Trace has like 7 or 8 different tours that they offer, from Old Taylor to the Hard Hat Tour to the Bourbon Barrel Tour. They even in October have a Ghost Tour, which is hard to get in unless you do it early. So it takes you behind the scenes of a lot of different places and a lot of history in that particular distillery, which is why it's one of my favorites. I love Heaven Hill too. That distillery and some of the history behind their products, as you brought up in your starting 5. I have quite a bit of their stuff too in terms of my bourbon selection, from Old Fitzgerald to William Heaven Hill and all the Elijahs. One of my son's favorite is Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel. So, in my opinion, if I were going to tell somebody about the best distillery tour that I've been on, it would be go try and do 2 or 3 of them at Buffalo Trace, because you're going to get multiple different parts of the tour. It's not just look at this, look at that, go in the tasting room, taste some bourbon, and move on to the next one. Because I've done the entire bourbon, got the stamps for the entire bourbon tour, went before it added like 8 or 9 more distilleries, but Buffalo Trace was my favorite.
Buffalo Trace definitely has been the most educational tour for me. As you said, I've won, I think, on 2 or 3 of the different tours that they have had. Probably helps that I do like Weller's and Blanton's and They have some of my favorite bourbons as well. Well, as we come to the end of the episode here, I want to thank Tim for his time, for his insight into the game, and to share his love for bourbon. So, Tim, thank you for being with us, and good luck this season as you will be heading out on the gridiron first, then the hardwood.
Thanks for the opportunity to be on here with you. Best wishes in the rest of the season, and hope to see you on the sideline one day soon. And good luck.
Thank you again, Tim. Well, that's a wrap on episode 1 of the Basketball and Bourbon podcast. Make sure you check back, as we'll be dropping new episodes of the Basketball and Bourbon podcast once a week. So until then, cheers to the round ball and the barrel.